What's your favorite scary movie?
Definitely a missed opportunity not releasing this review on Friday the 13th that we just had in October, but screw it, we're going to talk about the 2009 Friday the 13th anyways.
This place is called Camp Crystal Lake.
Against the advice of locals, Clay scours the eerie woods surrounding Crystal Lake for his missing sister. But the rotting cabins of an abandoned summer camp are not the only things that he finds out there. It had been 6 years since 2003's Freddy vs. Jason, the last time that we had seen Jason Voorhees on the big screen. And unfortunately, this is also the last time that we have seen the infamous mass serial killer on the big screen because we haven't had a Friday the 13th official film since. During the 2000s, we saw reboots for all kinds of different horror franchises, including the big ones like Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and of course, Friday the 13th from 2009. And I remember Friday the 13th, it came out in 2009. That was the year that I officially graduated high school, so I was really looking forward to seeing this film since the last time we had saw Jason was in Freddy vs. Jason, and that was a big deal for me. So this was the second Friday the 13th film that I had actually seen on the big screen, and so I remember going with a bunch of friends, and it was made it a big deal about it. Now this reboot was a little bit different than some of the other reboots that we had gotten for horror franchises because usually most of those other ones just focused on that first initial film. But with Friday the 13th, they actually took elements of basically 1 through 3 and combined them and put them into this movie because, as you guys know, with the original Friday the 13th, Mrs. Voorhees was the original killer. So now in this movie, we get basically the ending of the first film where she's going after the last counselor, ends up getting her head chopped off, but then we see that Jason was actually there in the woods when this happened, so he actually saw his mother getting decapitated. After that, the film goes to the modern day where a group of people are hiking in the woods looking for some weed, and watching this movie for the first time, you think, oh, this is our main group of characters for the film. And so one of the kids ends up telling the story, the legend of Camp Crystal Lake and Jason Voorhees around a campfire with his friends. And I love that campfire setting, that aspect to it. I know they did that in the original series. I believe it was part 2. I haven't seen some of the original Friday the 13th movies in a while, so if I got that wrong, don't come for my head, but I'm pretty sure it's part 2. And I love that when you get that in any of these kind of horror movies, that legend aspect to it, where kids are either around a campfire, or maybe they're just like, there are kids over at like a sleepover or something telling a scary story. So I thought that was really cool. But these guys end up realizing that they're actually a lot closer to Camp Crystal Lake than they initially thought, and they end up stumbling upon the camp, and so naturally they want to go check the place out and explore it. And of course, when this happens, or at least when some of the kids start doing this, this is when Jason shows up and he starts taking all the kids out one by one. The bear trap scene and then the girl getting burned alive in the sleeping bag are definitely 2 of the more brutal kills, I would say, in the beginning of the movie. And what you end up finding out is that this is just the opening of the movie. We haven't even got the title card yet. So all of this takes place in the beginning of the movie. First time watching this film, I was really caught me off guard because I thought for sure, oh, these are probably the kids that we're going to follow and, they'll end up all getting killed by the end of the movie. But no, this group all gets taken out except for one person at the beginning of the movie. And so I thought that was a fun little twist that I wasn't expecting the first time that I watched it. So then we get introduced to our actual main cast of the movie, and that includes Jared Padalecki and Danielle Panabaker. And Jared Padalecki, he plays this character named Clay, who we find out he's actually looking for a sister because his sister was one of the characters that were in the beginning part of the movie. And so he's going around town, he's talking to locals and putting up signs everywhere trying to find her. And I've always been a fan of Jared Padalecki. I loved him in Supernatural. I was a big fan, especially of seasons 1 through 5. I think I got up to 10, so I need to actually finish that series. But I really loved him in there. He was in the House of Wax, and of course he's here in Friday the 13th. And I've actually got to meet him a couple times in person, and he is such a nice guy, but goddamn, the dude is a giant. I mean, you could probably tell watching this movie, but yeah, he's a big dude. Then we get to meet the rest of the group that's going up to Camp Crystal Lake to party up around that area, and we get introduced to Trent, who has to be one of the biggest douchebags that I've ever seen in a horror movie. But even though he is a douchebag, he's one of those guys that you actually love to hate, or at least I did for this movie. He has a sex scene in here that I'm jumping a little bit ahead in the movie, but he has a sex scene in here where he ends up hooking up with one of the girls, and he says, and I'm not even kidding, if you guys haven't seen the movie, these are some lines, or at least I'm pretty sure I got the line correct, where he says, your tits are so juicy, dude. And then he says something along the lines of, you have perfect nipple placement. And I'm like, I wonder how many times it took to shoot these scenes for that guy to get those lines out without cracking up, because every time I watch the movie, I just laugh when, you know, those scenes are happening, because it's just like, what the, like, no one would say that. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this reboot actually takes elements of films 1 through 3 and combines them. And one of the things that's really cool is we get to see 3 different aspects of Jason. So we see a little bit of young Jason when you see him watching his mother getting his head decapitated. We also get to see Baghead Jason, which I know a lot of people really enjoy. And then we actually get to see Jason when he finally gets his hockey mask. He ends up finding that in a barn. So pretty cool that we get to see 3 different styles of Jason in this movie. Something else that I like that they did with Jason is that he's actually fairly smart here. He lives off the land, basically has an underground tunnel system so he can pop up all over the place, and thought he was actually the scariest he's been in a while with the way that he moves here. Derek Mears, he did a fantastic job with his portrayal of Jason. The one thing that I thought was a little weird, but it does make sense. I understand what they're going for, but he keeps a hostage in this film, and it's Clay's younger sister, Whitney, I believe her name is. He keeps a hostage throughout the film, but I understand because she looks like Jason's mother, so that's why he was keeping her as a hostage. But still a little weird that Jason has a hostage. And as far as the kills go with these characters, you get some pretty solid ones. I wouldn't say anything is like going to be in the top kills of horror of all time, but you get some pretty solid kills here. You get one guy when he's driving a boat gets an arrow through the head, so you get to see Jason practicing his archery a little bit. And then his girlfriend, she ends up getting a machete through the head when Jason's standing on top of the dock, picks her up, you get to see her tits, and then she slides down and goes back down into the water. Guy also gets an axe into his back. And then Trent, the douchiest of douchebags, he ends up getting his. He actually gets impaled through a truck. Jason throws him onto there, and then the guy drags him off. So he gets a pretty gnarly death. The one character I will say that I wasn't expecting to die was actually Danielle Panabaker's character, because she kind of goes off with Clay to try and help him find his sister. And so watching the movie for the first time, I was like, okay, it's probably going to be her and Clay and maybe the sister that survived the movie. But no, she ends up dying. And I actually had talked to Danielle Panabaker at a convention not too long ago, and I had mentioned that, and you know, you could tell that she kind of thought that she was going to survive as well. But yeah, so that was one that did surprise me in the movie. Eventually, though, Jason ends up getting killed, so he gets a chain like wrapped around his neck, and then his head, the back of his head, gets like chopped up with blades, and then they take off his mask, dunk him into the lake. But he does end up popping back up, you know, as the Friday the 13th films are notorious for one last scare, and comes through and grabs, it looks like, Whitney. So kind of leaves off with that, and then we never ended up getting another movie, so we don't know if either one of those characters survived, but which kind of sucks. One of the things that I do wish that we got more of, though, in this movie is that I wish we got some more I should say extended fight sequences between Clay and Jason, because both of those dudes are huge. So we did get a couple of them in here, but I just wish they maybe lasted a little bit longer. That would have been fun to see, just where these two giants battling each other. But overall, guys, I had a lot of fun with the 2009 Friday the 13th, and it still holds up just as well from when I saw it in theaters. One of my favorite portrayals of Jason, and it's really too bad that we never got a sequel to this. Definitely one of the best horror remakes for me of its time. And I was shocked when I looked up the Rotten Tomato score, and I think it has like a 25% or something like that. I mean, granted, I know, especially more so back then, it wasn't until kind of like recently horror's been getting, I feel like, a little bit more respect when it comes to reviews for movies, especially with the elevated horror kind of stuff. So in a way it surprised me, but in a way it didn't. But it has a 25%, and I don't agree with that at all. As far as the score goes, I would give this thing like an 8.7 out of 10. I really enjoy it. Like I said, I think it still really holds up. Definitely something that, you know, we'll watch over and over again. But I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are of the 2009 Friday the 13th. And where would you have liked them to go if they did have a sequel to this movie? I know there was talk of doing one in the snow, which I believe Never Hike Alone. I gotta watch those movies. I haven't seen either one of the fan films, but I believe one of them does take place in the snow. But that would have been cool to see if they did that as a sequel to this movie. But yeah, where would you have liked them to take a Friday the 13th movie if they did a sequel to this 2009 version. Let me know down below in the comments, and also where does this rank in the Friday the 13th franchise for you guys. So let me know down below in the comments. If you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. Give this video a thumbs up, and as always guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.